This week on Notorious Scoundrels podcast.
I hope y'all were taking notes out there because, man, that was a whirlwind tour.
Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast, where we talk about Star Wars Legion. We're going to talk some tactics and some competitive play. And I'm joined by my friends Mike and David. What's up, guys?
Hey, everybody.
And I'm Kyle. That would be the third wheel there. All right. So
you're the big wheel on this tricycle.
There you go.
We're just
the small back wheels hanging on.
Right, we're tailing in your shadow.
Yeah.
I thought we were like that three-legged dog with the two wheels on the back thing.
Oh wow. That's really sad.
Yikes. All right.
Sorry, off the rails before we even start.
Setting the tone.
All right, so we got a couple housekeeping announcements. The first, just more Adepticon reminders. These are going to be similar from last time. Lists are due if you're in the last chance qualifier by the 19th of March. So that is in 8 days. So get those in. Please submit them in TTA. So that's Tabletop Admiral format. That will make LJ's life easier and our lives easier for streaming purposes. So please submit them in TTA and submit them by the 19th. And also just a reminder again to paint your dudes, because there is a 3-color minimum for Adepticon.
I'm officially in emergency painting mode.
Yeah, me too. I have more than 20 miniatures to paint still, and we are down to like 2 weeks now, basically. So
what corners do you cut now? Do you just do you leave the bases off?
Sleep.
What do you do?
Sleep is the corner.
Sleep.
I'm cutting.
Okay, that's correct. Okay. Yeah, just
I mean,
just like if you have 8 hours, right? You just put on some music or something and just knock them out. Just go.
When do you ever have 8 hours? When my painting time is measured in 10-minute increments in the evening.
Well, I have a day off every so often, so it's different for different people, right? Different strokes.
Yeah, I might have to take
different
one.
strokes.
Just to get that done.
Yeah, different brush strokes. Hey,
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
No, I'm probably gonna cut the quality corner and just slap paint on my
I appreciate what you're doing. I unfortunately have too big of a ego to do that yet. I might end up there.
Yeah. I certainly doubt it. Not intend on ending up here, but it's an inevitability.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. All right. At least some of my guys, I have like Luke and a Rebel Trooper squad that are painted to.
I mean, your painted stuff looks great, man.
Well, yeah. So I can just point to those guys and be like, that's what they're supposed to look like. Just ignore all these other crappy guys.
It's too bad that 247 looks so good.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, I know, right? And yeah.
Sad face.
The good news is that the units in this game are so cheap that if you put a bad paint job on them, and you can just buy another unit.
That's probably true.
Yeah, I wonder if you'd save time with paint thinner. I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. I've never had a ton of luck with stripping paint off models generally. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't had much luck with stripping either.
But
I don't think any of us have.
I'm not quitting my day job or anything.
Yeah. I don't think any of us have.
Well,
okay.
Now that you mention it, we were in Vegas the other week.
That's true.
Okay.
All right. So should we get on to? Yeah. All right. So we're gonna try and actually do some segments here. We're gonna start with games played, to the extent that we played games, which we all did, luckily.
Yay! Practice.
Then we'll hit some tactics, and then there's some new stuff. So just a public service announcement on the new stuff. We are not going to talk about the newest new stuff, which is Tauntauns and the Rebel Veterans, which look awesome.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Yes, we can talk about that. Those models are freaking...
Oh my god. So my immediate reaction was they stole whoever did the Space Wolf Thunderwolf cavalry models and had them do this. And I am so excited that I might actually play a little bit of Rebels like coming up, because those models look bonkers.
Yeah, those Tauntauns, I'm so excited to paint them. Like, I'm going to get one even if I end up not using them, but their rules look, at least from what we can tell, look pretty awesome. So
yeah, the rules look amazing.
And I don't think this is going to be a T47 situation where I buy it and paint it and look awesome and it goes on my shelf.
No, I mean, I think that clearly the most direct analogy is bikes. But again, we're not going to go down this rabbit hole. They look amazing. And let's go into games played. Eh?
Yeah, we got to keep our eyes on the prize with our Adepticon practice.
Yep. All right, so I was in Chicago this week.
Yeah, you were.
Home of the 312th. We had two guys on the podcast from the Chicago area a few episodes ago after LVO, John Griffin and Joe DePinto, who were first and second at LVO respectively and both undefeated. So, some good players in that area. I was there for another thing, actually, a fantasy baseball draft. My hobby mistress, if you will.
Wait, can we back up for a second? Because actually, we talked about you being in Chicago a couple times now, like before the cast and everything. You went for a fantasy baseball draft?
Yeah, I'm in this fantasy league with a bunch of guys that
can't you
I've been in a league with forever.
Do that over the internet?
Yes, we can do it on the internet.
Okay.
But it's not nearly as fun. This is actually we often a couple times we've gone to baseball spring training to do it.
Oh,
so
all right. That's a long drive to.
It is.
Okay.
But it's where I'm from, so I got to go eat Portillo's, which is also good. I had Portillo's no less than 3 times.
All right.
So I didn't fly all the way there just for Portillo's, but
I have a friend named Tom who's also from the Chicago area, and he recommended Portillo's to me as well.
I guess we're gonna get Portillo's.
We absolutely are going to. I'm gonna drive you there, and you can eat food or not, but I'm gonna get some.
Okay.
So
sounds like a plan.
Anyway, so games played. So I played a game with Joe. I did not actually even think to bring my stuff or anything, but I flew in on Thursday and I'm like, hey, wait a minute. I remember when we talked to these guys that they said that their Legion night was on Thursdays. So I just messaged them on Discord and I said, hey, do you mind if I swing by? And Joe was like, do you want to play? And I didn't bring any stuff. He's like, don't worry, I got you. So I borrowed, like you, Mike, Joe collects both Rebels and Imperials. So I borrowed all his Rebel stuff.
Solid.
Yep. And we played a game. He played, neither of us were messing around. He played his LVO list, and I played my, one version of my high command list, the version with Pathfinders in them, because I need to get them out of my system. So I've talked about this before,
later,
but
I guess.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we will.
But so I've talked about this list before, but it's just Luke, Leia, 4 Z6s, fleets, 2 snipers, and Pathfinders, with various upgrades thrown in there. And he did his Palpatine LVO list, which we've talked about previously also, but it's Palpatine 6 core to include 2 medics, a sniper, and an IRG.
Yeah, I'd ask if there was any modifications to that list, but we haven't had a peep out of Imperial training camps for a while now. So.
Oh yeah, you mean the things that rhyme with Krennic and Death Troopers?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have not heard any peeps on that front, which people are understandably upset about. But at this point, I don't think we'll get them for Adepticon. I think Empire will still be fine, but we're tangenting.
Yeah,
here.
yeah, you good.
So there's a couple takeaways from this game. I was blue player. I had him by, I think, 2 points. So we used my deck. With my Pathfinder Wonder Twins list, I have been cutting key positions because that is Wonder Twins is at a disadvantage to Palpatine, Vader, and arguably also Boba because of bounty with that objective. And Pathfinders are obviously pretty good at recover. So historically, I cut recover, but with my Pathfinders in there, I slotted that in and swapped out key positions. So it was a pretty favorable turn 0 for me. Basically, Joe was in a position where he had to choose between either breakthrough or recover. And he ended up choosing recover, which was probably good, but it allowed me to pick the deployment. And I went with major offensive. There was this. This is actually a map that Joe made and submitted for the Adepticon terrain contest. But there was this big flat temple kind of on the right side of the board that I could access with major offensive. So I forced major offensive and I dropped all my Z6s pretty much right on top of that thing. Well, 3 of them, and my Pathfinders. So I basically just created a situation where I was able to like rain dice down on that mid box from on top of that temple thing. And I had Luke near that mid box, just waiting to do like a last first box grab. And I got him to, I kind of forced him to play Give Into Your Anger early so that I could do that Luke box grab potentially on turn 4-ish, which kind of put the pressure on him to flood the middle so that Luke couldn't do that. So it ended up being a W for me. I played the Pathfinders really conservatively, even though it wasn't recover. I didn't drop them on the middle box because I knew they would get, Give Into Your Anger and then pasted by Snows. So I did not drop them on the middle box. I just dropped them on one of my safe boxes, and I basically used them as like range 3 to 4 fire support, which worked out really well.
And so what you're saying is you didn't infiltrate at all?
Yeah, I mean, I did a little bit. Like I dropped them on, one of my safe boxes, which was range 1 from my deployment zone.
Okay.
I mean,
so I got a little value out of it, but
not a lot.
If all's infiltrate is like Scout 3, it's still good.
Yeah, and they have a great, Biston obviously has a great range 4 dice pool. I was playing Pow. He has a great range 3 dice pool. And they actually dealt the killing blows to Palpatine later in the game after Anali would die. He had 2 health left, and they got like 7 hits on him.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, essentially I forced him into a situation where he had to like have a good Anali would die turn, and he was shooting a bunch of stuff in cover, and it wasn't a very successful Anali will die. He killed, some minis from each unit, but he actually didn't eliminate any activations with it. My main like strategic takeaway from this game is kind of interesting. We timed it because we were both practicing for Adepticon. So we timed it at 2.5 hours. We were hitting turn 5 with like 15 minutes to go. So we both basically agreed that if we were playing under real time constraints, that would probably be the last turn. And the situation at the beginning of turn 5 was interesting. I had Luke in base contact with the middle box and with one of his unit leaders who was also in base contact with the middle box. And it was basically just that unit leader that he had left in the middle. So we both knew that, we each had 2 boxes, and then that middle box was open. So I had played both my 1-pips at that point, and he had also. So he played push, and I played, and Palpatine was dead by this point, and I played my ally. He won the roll off, so he dodged and then grabbed the box with his 1 lone stormtrooper. And I'm like, all right, no problem. I got a lightsaber, right? I can handle this 1 lone stormtrooper. And all I had to do was kill him. Since I was up on points, I didn't actually need to even grab the box. So I aimed and attacked the stormtrooper with Luke. And I completely whiffed, all blanks. Wow. So, yeah, it was this funny situation where like I needed to kill this guy to win, right? Because he now has 3 boxes. And I whiffed with Luke. I did aim, so I rerolled. And I got just 1 hit on the aim, so he was able to dodge that with his dodge token that he had taken.
Oh my goodness.
So Luke is now engaged with this guy, so I can't shoot him. I had already burned force push earlier in the game. So like, and we both agreed that the game would end on this turn. So I'm like, well, crap, what am I going to do? So I managed to still snipe one of his like rear box grabbers and force him to drop a box. And it ended up working out in my favor. But
like, I just want you to know that is the opposite of what happened to me this weekend.
Yeah. So, well, I want to go back and talk about like must-win scenarios and probabilities. So obviously the odds of completely whiffing with Luke's lightsaber with an aim token are extremely low. It's like 2%.
Yeah, it's like supremely unlucky.
But it's more than 0%, right?
Yes.
So if you have a situation like that where like I absolutely have to kill this guy to win, I had a plan C, right, which was sniping one of those rear box grabbers, but it was pretty low probability plan C, because he had IRG back there too, so I needed a crit, which I ended up getting. But I didn't have a plan B, right? I had my plan A, and then I had my crappy plan C. And plan B in this situation, the correct plan B would have been to just attack and then leave an action to recover and force push. And then I would have had 10 activations to shoot this guy with.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
if Luke missed, right?
You're likely to kill him without an aim token, frankly.
Right. So like, not only is the aim token kind of redundant, but it also prevents me from being able to activate that plan B and push him out into the open where he can then be attacked by my other 9 activations.
So is the summary of this is that you made a calculation error?
Well,
right. Basically, like if you have I didn't see what my option was, my plan B option. Like, okay. I didn't see that I should have attacked and recovered force push.
Well, you don't assume that's going to happen, right?
Well, and that's exactly my point, right? Is even though like I assumed, of course, Luke's going to kill this one guy, right? Well, he didn't. Like, so if your chance of failure is more than 0 and you have a an alternative where you can increase your chance of success in a must-win scenario, then you absolutely need to take that outcome, right?
Yeah,
that's all I'm saying.
That's fair. So I guess my question would be, why didn't you just snipe the dude?
Because he was already engaged with Luke.
Oh, okay. So before that even started, you were already engaged.
At the beginning of the turn, yeah. He smartly engaged him at the end of the previous turn.
I missed that portion. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Because he did, I think, more than I foresee a situation where like I whiff on Luke and he still wins because he has 3 boxes. I think he correctly foresaw that as a possibility.
Which is awesome because he's playing Palpatine.
Right.
I don't know, man. That seems pretty loose.
Well, I mean, at that point, it's like, if that's the only option you have,
I guess.
And he almost won anyway. So, no, that was on turn 5. Obviously, if we had played faster, turn 6 would have been another shot at that. But yeah, it was a lesson for me on like must-win scenarios. And even if you've got like a 98% chance of success, if you have a way where you can make that 99, then you should do it.
Totally. I don't disagree there.
So that was my takeaway. And it was super fun to go to their game store, Game Storm in Lamont. And there was, over the course of the evening, there was 4 different Legion games going on. So that's pretty good. And it was fun to meet those guys again, several that went to LVO. So
yeah, they got a real active scene.
That's what it sounds like.
They do.
So you were able to confirm how active it was then, huh?
Indeed, it was active.
Sweet.
And thanks guys for hosting me, and for Joe for letting me borrow your stuff so that we could play. So that's all I got there.
So Mike, you played at Huzzah this week.
I did. I played 4 games, even though very few people wanted to play 4 games. So I played against Matt Dunn and Gordon Chase, who are good friends of ours and are going to Adepticon. I also played against a guy named Cody and Dylan Stevens, who I believe is from. You can find him in the Discord as Stevens, I think is just his Discord name. This weekend was a learning experience for me. It was an intentional learning experience, I guess is what I should say. So, round 1, I was playing as Matt Dunn. He brought an interesting list like he always does, frankly. I might not agree with what he does a lot of the time, but he's always very creative and out of the box. So he brought Jin, Leia, Wookiees, full unit of Commandos, full unit of Pathfinders, which ended up being an interesting list. And I decided to take Red Player and let him have recover because I wanted to see how my Boba Veers list could handle Jin on the box. Not well is the answer to the question. It did not go well.
How did it all fall out? Like, what was the sequence?
Yeah, so he was blue player. He infiltrated Jin on the box. Again, this was totally avoidable. I could have banned recover, but I specifically decided not to because I wanted to practice against it.
Yeah, for the sake of practice, you picked the most adverse conditions.
Yeah. So he threw Jin on the box. I essentially set the entirety of my army up within. We were playing, I think, Major Offensive, range 3 or very close to range 3 of wherever Jin would end up after a move. So I was just planning to see if I could shoot Jin off the table. Turn 1 was the battle plan. So I opened with coordinated fire because coordinated fire is pretty good when you've got a target at range 3, and B, I figured if there's gonna be a turn where you shoot Jin off the table, it's where every single unit in your army shoots a Jin with 5 aim tokens.
Wow. Yeah, I would think that'd be true as well. I think you would carve her up, right?
Yeah, that's what I thought. So essentially what happened was he opened with coordinated bombardment, which I hadn't planned on. I thought he was going to open with rebellious because, and
right, to get the 1 pip on Jen and to get the double move potentially.
Yeah, he picks up the box and moves and at least gets her like a little bit out of harm's way, right? So he opens coordinated bombardment, maybe foreseeing the coordinated fire plan, and suppresses a couple of the units. Not a huge deal. So I activate. Veers hands out some aimed tokens and also shoots Jin. I think I got 1 wound on her with Veers because he was also in range 3. And then so he pulls a token out of the bag, and I believe it was the first token he pulled was like a core unit, and he's like, "Okay, I'm improving." I was like, "All right," and he improvs into Jin. I was like,
"Wow,
right. Okay, well,
what a lucky duck! Improving forward, doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it does. So he improvs into Jin. He picks up the box and runs away. So the good news here is that I'm not in a bad spot. Most of my units are still within like range 3 or a minor move up in range 3, and I've already got aim tokens, and I can move up and shoot and all that jazz. So, I start moving my dudes up like 1 by 1 and shooting her. I think I ended up getting like 3 wounds on her total in like the first 4 activations, and then so after 4 activations, we're at staging ground. Jin essentially has like heavy cover. She's got 4 danger sense 4. She's got half health. And this dude walks up and he like throws his medic squads as far forward as he possibly can and starts healing her.
Nice.
And I'm just like, all right, well, this kind of changes the game plan because I was only able to put 3 wounds on her when she didn't have danger sense 4 and didn't have cover and all that jazz. So, it just didn't go well. And so I think about halfway through the turn, I recognized this wasn't going to work. So I just shifted the game plan and went for the auxiliary boxes. I ended up almost winning the game, just by pretty much almost tabling him. Just chasing him across the board and shooting him as I went. Had I decided to just go for the auxiliary boxes to start with, I probably could have just shot the units, grabbing them from the get-go, and it wouldn't have been a big deal. The other option that I ended up considering was I think that it might be right just to engage Jin with Boba. And
just like fly in there and get her in
the way. Just so she can't move. I mean, if she there's two options for her at that point, right? She now like is going to pick up the box and is stuck there, and his whole army can't shoot Jin or can't shoot Boba, which is still great for me, right? Or he withdraws and like I get the box. Like it just, I mean, I guess you can like he can toss the stun baton thing at Boba's forehead and try and bop him a couple times, but I think you might just want to fly Boba in there, lock Jin down so that the rest, so your IRG can catch up essentially.
And then you throw whipcord turn 2.
Exactly. Yeah, and then she's not going nowhere. Yeah.
Would you consider using rocket turn 1, or do you think that would not have done enough?
I the reason I didn't use rocket turn 1 was just because I thought I was going to need a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Because the medics were in the equation, and it just
right,
like
that's true.
So I don't know. I think that overall it's possible the rocket might have been good enough, but the thing is the rocket can't one shot her.
Right.
You know, it's only 5 dice.
Right.
Yeah, it's not possible.
Yeah.
Although you can get pretty close to one-shotting her with the rocket.
Yeah, but you don't have an aim token. So I think the average on it is like 4. So you're probably gonna eke out like somewhere between 2 and 3 wounds on that, generally, if she's got duck and cover and all that jazz. Because if she's got duck and cover, you roll 4 out. I guess she doesn't get the let cover, but she does get danger sense still. I don't know. I'd have to math it out, but essentially, I don't know. I'm not confident that would have done the trick, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I'm just spitballing.
Yeah, I think the kind of like the lock it in melee is probably the best solution. If they just want to go for it.
I have a question. So Boba's movement, right? That's what, 8 inches?
Yeah.
And then the range on whipcord is range 1.
Yeah, so you can effectively you got like a 22-inch threat range for whipcord.
Okay, so that then means you can completely get around Rebellious. I was just thinking, this just occurred to me. Because Rebellious only triggers when the unit activates within range 2. So if you activate Boba outside of 2, Rebellious won't fire. Because it's like a worse standby in the sense that the unit has to activate within range and sight. It can't finish an action or move.
Yeah, that's definitely true. The thing is, you don't really need to worry about it on turn 1 anyways, because Rebellious is pretty terrible.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty terrible card.
I mean, I think it's good. I just don't think it's good in the box grab scenario.
For
just
sure.
Because you need to be able to pick up the box before you activate the text on it.
I'd honestly take complete the mission over that, just because you get the free suppression.
Yeah, that's certainly possible.
And you can't be panicked; it charges your danger sense. So
yeah. So I guess long story short here on this first game is that I think that a week or 2 ago we talked down the box grab with Jin. I think it's better than I thought it was. I don't think it's like a KP type scenario. I think it is winnable in the same fashion that Recover has always been winnable if you decide to just not fight for the middle box and like go around the outside.
Yeah, and actually, I had a game against Jay a couple weeks ago now where I did the Jin box grab on Recover, and he did basically what you're suggesting, which is, he threw some dice at Jin, but he really focused on trying to contest my my secondary boxes and prevent, throw suppression tokens and prevent troops from picking them up and or running away, and that's ultimately what I think what won him the game in that instance. So I think it is very winnable if you decide to do that instead of trying to prevent Jin from grabbing the mid box.
Yeah, I mean, again, this was just kind of like a test scenario. This is the first time I had played against Jin, like not online, and she's good. She's a lot better than I gave her credit for, I think.
She is very difficult to kill with any kind of ranged attack that does not have pierce and or
Yeah,
sharpshooter.
like if you don't have a lightsaber in your list, and you can't get a hold of her with like IRG because she keeps on like running away or whatever, or she's just far away to begin with, she's really hard to kill. She's insanely hard to kill. So, that was my main learning experience for the day. Round 2, I played against a guy named Cody. He was playing a Palp list. We played Recover. I think a total of 2 boxes got picked up all game.
Wow.
Yeah, he essentially beelined across the map and jazz hands everything in sight. And once Palp was dead, I essentially just flipped the table and tabled him. He kind of ignored Boba all game, and Boba just like ripped all his squads apart. So I didn't even bother picking up boxes because it was unnecessary. And then game 3 was against Gordon, which was also an interesting game in that I had the reverse situation of what you had happen to you, Kyle. I had a 3-man IRG squad with an Electro Staff Guard on Luke. He one-shot them.
So he rolled 6 hits and you rolled all
Yes.
blanks?
Wow.
Oh. So not even Son of Skywalker?
No,
just
no
six blanks.
SOS. It was one shot. One shot.
Oh.
6 natties and 6 blanks. And I was just like, like I had done an amazing job of essentially just like boxing Luke out so that he couldn't touch any unit but the IRG. And I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to charge the IRG in there. They charge in there. They deal like 3 wounds to Luke. I'm like, all right, I'm feeling great about this. And they just died. I was like, all right, I guess the Electro Staff. Sometimes you pay for the Electro Staff and you don't get anything. So
that's nutty.
Yeah. So that the end of that game actually became very interesting though. So Luke did wipe my IRG, but essentially it left him in the middle of the map. We were playing, I don't know, people may have seen pictures of it on Facebook because I think a lot of Matt's boards are on there. It's this Hoth map with the AT-AT and all the ice and stuff. It's very open. So Luke's just chilling out there. I killed him. I killed Leia on like turn 2 with Boba. We were playing Breakthrough, and Gordon got like most of his units into my deployment zone on like turn 4, which was interesting because I still had heroes left. So all my guys were not in panic mode. So I just my plan then became to turn around and try and panic his dudes in my deployment zones off the board because we were playing battle lines. Because if you panic in battle lines, you're just dead.
Yep. So did it work?
It did not, because he ended up killing Boba. But it was a unique scenario that I have not run into before, where you kind of like, you actually probably shouldn't jump into the end zone if both of your commanders are dead until like the last turn, if there's a panic issue going on.
Yep.
So that was interesting. And then me and Stevens played a game after the tournament. He won the tournament afterwards because, you know, I love Legion and was ready for more. I can't really say it was a super interesting game. I think he was pretty tired overall. We ended up, I gave him blue player. We ended up playing Sabotage, and he ended up coming to me because I think he was tired, and it went very poorly overall. There's not much to talk about there.
Yeah, and actually in our tactics bit, I think we're going to talk about like how to play each objective, and if you're blue player on Sabotage, don't attack.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
that's the short version advice.
Yeah.
But we can elaborate on that later.
I mean, sometimes if you lose an activation or something, you have to. But was like one of
Yeah.
those scenarios where I just hit all my guys behind a rock, and he came around the corner, and I was like, "All right, snow trooper, you IRG you," and like I deleted a couple of units, and it just went downhill very quickly. So it is what it is. But all the games were awesome. All the games were fun. I had a ton of fun this weekend, and yeah. And Dave, you had something going on too, didn't you?
Yes, I played in a tournament at Great Escape, which is the store up in Sacramento. Small tournament, 6 players, 3 rounds still, because we just decided we wanted to play 3 games. So I brought Luke, Leia, Pathfinders, kind of the similar list to what Kyle's running, just because I think it's definitely worth exploring, and I think I finally found my footing with Pathfinders as a unit. I know that last time we were on the cast, I was sort of down on them, and I'm like, almost 6. I don't know how to use them. Maybe they're not driving with me, but I think I figured out how to actually use them, and that's just being conservative and then like finding your moment with them. Just if you have an opportunity to infiltrate, do it. But if you don't, you can still use infiltrate to get to good places with them. And they're not well, they're tanky, but they're not like ridiculous, right? They'll still die given certain interactions, but they have the ability to take a lot of damage. So I played a Great Escape, and the tables were pretty cool. There were some sparse ones, but they were pretty much what you'd expect to see at like an LVO or any other large event like that. So I played on this indoor table with some awesome trees and some treehouse type terrains for 2 of my games. And the first game was Rebel Mirror. I played against an archetype I'm calling Han Shui with Rebel Good Stuff. It's a list I've seen before. So basically, I've been talking up this archetype on the Discord, this Han Shui plus Rebel elite units, because I think it's underplayed. I think a lot of people see Luke and they're like, well, Luke's got Pierce and he's got red saves and he's got all these great tools. Why would I leave him out of my list? And he also kind of wrecks the mirror. I don't know if this is a good time to bring up the dichotomy between Rebel lists with Luke and Rebel lists without Luke that occurred at LVO. Kyle, but you had an interesting statistic about this.
So we previously talked about just sort of a general stat from LVO. Rebel lists with Luke win-loss went 39 and 25 overall, so that's obviously pretty good. However, if you break that down by mirrors and cross-faction matches, it gets much more interesting. Versus Empire lists, Rebel lists with Luke were 15 and 12, which is roughly 50-50 in a sample size like that. And then you look at the Rebel matchups. So I broke this down further, where there was Rebel mirrors where one side had Luke and one side did not, and then also just true mirrors where each player had Luke.
Keep going.
Yeah, so in the true mirrors where each player had Luke, they were 7 and 7. It was an even split.
Well, hold up. So let's talk about that stat real quick.
Yeah,
because this is like lies, damn lies, and statistics. Of course, it's 7 and 7. It can't not be 7 and 7.
Yeah.
Like, all right, continue.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's a total Mark Twain right there.
All right.
But in situations where one player had Luke and one player didn't, the Luke player went 17 and 5. So of the 22 games where one player had Luke and one player did not have Luke in Rebel Mirrors, the Luke player won 17 times. And that's where pretty much all of those like excess games from the 39 and 25 breakdown come from, is in Rebel Mirrors where one player had Luke and one player didn't. So I don't want to I guess we can talk a little cause and effect. I've always felt personally, when I'm just playing around with lists that don't have Luke in them, and I'm playing against another Rebel player, I feel like I'm in a much worse spot as far as countering Luke than if I, am playing against an Empire player with just about anything else. I feel like Empire has more Luke answers, in the form of 2 Force users with Pierce Immune, Given to Your Anger, IRG, Whipcord. Whereas, at least for me personally, the Luke counter for Rebels is Luke. So I don't know. Personally, I think that's more to do with Rebels not having an anti-Luke tool besides Luke himself that is effective and consistent. Wookiees can do that a little bit. And actually, all 5 of those games where the Luke player lost in that situation, the other player had either Wookiees or Chewie or both. But I don't know. I feel like Rebels need an anti-Luke tool personally.
I'll add on to what you're saying, Kyle. Is that my experience both this weekend and in the past few weeks has completely reflected what the statistics saying and your instinct on this. At LVO, I played Wonder Twins at LVO, and my games against non-Luke Rebels, I was 2-0. And my games against Empire, I was 1-1. So that's completely reflective of what we experienced, or what you've mentioned here with the stats. And I've also experienced multiple scenarios where Han Chewie with Wookiees are able to smother Luke to the point where it creates enough space between that and reckless diversion that assault units, like say an officer fleet, or just buff units like Pathfinders, can just mow down the 4Z6 of the Wonder Twins list and just kill them off. And then, so Luke's alive, he's stalled, but then everything else is dying around him. So they just kind of just smother Luke and keep him bottled up with Wookiees and create multiple like sort of threats. And I especially want to say that Han Chewie double Wookiee is actually really unexplored, and I think is worth a look. It's going to take quite a bit of skill and quite a bit of a good turn 0 to pull that off, like making sure you get good objectives like, say, intercept or sabotage battle lines, reading the board well and having favorable terrain. There's a few things that you need to have happen to make that a reliable result, but I still think it's worth looking at. And another archetype I'll just briefly mention also is what Mike, what you mentioned with Jin and medics. I think that's another thing that could be looked at just in terms of Rebel innovation.
It's frightening. Straight up frightening.
And I'll say also Jin Leia won this event. I don't think he had medics, but Jin Leia did win this event, and one of their wins, they went 3-0, and one of those wins was a box grab. But it was against someone that didn't know about it. So maybe that's a one-trick pony kind of thing. I don't know.
We talked about this a little bit before the cast, and I know this opinion is going to be a little controversial, and that's okay. But for the past 8 months of this game, and I'm talking pre-Jin, pre-Pathfinders, because that's what the LVO stats are, right? The majority of the experienced Rebel players in this game had decided that Luke was like the best thing you could be doing. And I think to some extent, the people that landed on that probably to some degree have a little bit better grasp of the game than the people that didn't. So I don't know. I sort of feel like the stat doesn't surprise me a ton. Just because, like, if you're not taking Luke, you're probably already, disadvantaged just from like I don't have as good pieces as you, but you also made that decision to not bring Luke, which suggests that you might be like less experienced with the game to me. So it feels sort of like a double whammy in that to that extent. But I don't know. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I feel like the versus Empire number would be more skewed if that was the case. But I get what you're saying.
I'm gonna just say one last thing before I should probably get back on topic, but it's a really good thing worth discussing in the long term. If you're able to silence Luke or just kind of smother him and take him out of the equation, you're gonna win the battle if you have Han and Chewie, because you have Guardian and you have Reckless Diversion to split their damage. And like you have a timing window in which you can make that happen as Han Chewie Wookiees to keep Luke out of the fight for a little bit. And I think that's definitely something worth exploring as a strategy or as a tactic for Han and Chewie going forward. And this is like I'm suggesting playing Han Chewie non-skew. So like, don't play Han Chewie or Chewie Leia with triple sabs or triple flamers or whatever, what
Right.
have you, but just like a kind of normal looking Han Chewie Wookiees
Right.
list.
It's like a Wonder Twins list where Luke is Han and Leia is Chewie. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can play double Wookiees, don't play snipers, play paths instead. And I don't know, you don't have a whole lot of points left over after that, but at the same time you can still just make it work.
Yeah.
It's possible. And that's mainly because Chewie is kind of like this great enabler of all these sort of rebel units that are considered B tier without him hanging out. Like even full commandos, for example, I consider them kind of B tier, but if they have room to work, that is, if they have Chewie standing behind them to guardian them so they survive for more than one turn, they can be pretty devastating. They really can. But anyway, they win the attrition war, and that's pretty much what happened to me in this game. Luke got bottled up. He got stuck in contact with a bunch of Wookiees. It didn't seem like it was a good idea to force push them because they'd charge other more vulnerable units, and so Luke just decided to stay in and chop them up. And I lost the attrition game, mainly because intercept requires you to be at a certain part of the map at a certain time, and he had the cover near the point and I didn't, and so I had to run my core units into the breach on top of losing this attrition battle, and eventually just lost the game because of that. So that allowed me to submarine to a third place finish in my next two games. So the next two games I played against an Imperial list with just sort of Imperial, smorgasbord players, a little bit newer. Um, Played like Veer's bikes, Eweb with like Snows and full scouts with the Saboteur guy, and I made a critical error. I forgot that you could arm out of a melee, and I got hit with a bomb. I think I had 4 units get hit by a bomb, including the Pathfinders, but the Pathfinders, thanks to their danger sense, took no damage, and they took suppression to charge their danger sense, which was kind of cool. That the suppressive mines worked against him a little bit with the paths. But I squeaked that game out basically just on by virtue of having my unit leaders in the right place at the right time and suppressing him with my snipers from the backfield and just not allowing him to advance on the middle with any sort of ability or speed. It definitely came down to the Pathfinders successfully killing off a DLT unit to win that game, though. And then the last game, we had a drop, and so the TO subbed in, and he doesn't play as much as the people playing in the tournament, and he played like a Boba Bikes list, and the pads infiltrate. It was KP, and the pads infiltrated onto his key position in heavy cover and just stayed entrenched for the rest of the game, and he couldn't really unseat them just because of danger sense rolling hot, them having dodges from Leia. There were quite a few good things going on there for the paths, and they rolled really well, and eventually came down to Son of Skywalker versus Boba Fett, whipcord, and Luke won that roll and killed Boba Fett with one swing. Like it just wasn't happening for him after that. So that's kind of how that tournament fell out. Jin Leia was the ultimate winner, and yeah, again, so I encourage people who are not like in tournament prep mode like we are, start looking at these lists and take a good hard look, because I think there's fresh green grass to be mowed there in terms of just finding new places to go within the game.
I think that Jin and Pathfinders generally has broken Rebel lists wide open. Frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Han Shui was on the way to doing that, and I think Jin is a new dimension. You can totally play like more objective based and more like just supporting yourself and just doing tricksy stuff rather than just kicking your opponent's teeth in with Luke and 4Z6s.
She's a power hitter that does something very different in the same way that like Boba is a power hitter that does something very different than like Vader. Vader and Luke are like pretty similar in that for the most part you go forth and kill things, right? And I feel like Rebels have kind of been lacking a Boba-esque character, and Jin feels like that to me.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty excited after Adepticon, once I have some more time to experiment, to try and cast off the shackles of Skywalker and play around with some other combinations.
Yeah, this has been your project, but I think now you have enough material to work with.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely will
Yeah.
when Sabine comes out.
Oh yeah, like I think Sabine as a solo commander is definitely a thing.
It's definitely not a
Or
thing
sorry,
because she's
you know
an
what I mean.
operative.
Sorry, you know what I mean. But like Leia Sabine, like Leia
Yeah,
Chewie
yeah.
Sabine could
Yeah,
be a thing.
totally.
Yeah.
Cool. So, what we got next on the docket?
So you want to talk some tactics and how to play each objective? We can walk through them one at a time briefly.
Sure. So just you want to just name one, and then we'll just put our
Key
thoughts
positions.
in the hat. Don't run into the middle too early.
Don't run into the middle too early. Okay. Do you want to elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that I don't like playing intercept the transmissions as rebels just because it forces me to walk to a certain part of the board by a certain round. Now I say this, Kyle informed me that I shouldn't be doing this, but because of the time limited nature of tournaments, I do not know that I can reliably reach 6 rounds. So I have a feeling in the back of my head that I need to get points on round 2 because points, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, right? So if I have points, then I'm set. And so I feel like I have to be at a certain part of the board by round 2. And if my terrain does not allow me to capture in a way that is safe, I'm at a serious disadvantage. And so I despise intercept for that reason and love KP because KP is only scored at the end. And so that allows me to play how I want until time starts getting down. Then I can make my calculations about what I need to do to get leaders on the point
That's
to actually
an interesting
win.
take on it. I absolutely I sort of like hate it for the reverse, I guess, psychology of that. I think the fact that you don't know when a KP game is going to end, in my mind, that just is a huge problem. Similarly, intercept and breakthrough is probably the biggest one, followed by intercept in my mind, and then KP, where variable game length is a serious problem when we're talking about anticipated scoring points. Go ahead.
Right. So for all of these, we're talking about in the context of a tournament where you may not actually finish all 6 turns. Yep.
Yeah, we got to caveat this discussion with that because we're talking about, practical advice for the real world, essentially, of tournament games.
So, like, when we're talking about KP, if we're talking like outside of tournaments, I don't take the KP points until like I don't even think about them until turn like 5. It's essentially just a preserve your units, try and table your opponent. That's what it's supposed to be. In a tournament, though, you have to consider taking those KP points as early as turn 2, in my opinion, because the game could be over on turn 4, and you got to kind of get in there, hunker down, and make sure you at least have a claim. I don't know. That's how I feel about key positions.
I think you do. I think you really need to watch the clock. This goes for all of the ones you just mentioned.
Oh yeah.
And you need to like have at least a good estimate when the game is going to end, and then you need to just plan for 1 turn earlier. I definitely do think that, and maybe we can talk about intercept next. But I think particularly as rebels, like you definitely cannot just like rush stuff into the zone, so to speak, because your dudes will just die. So
you better save, bros.
Yeah,
exactly. Play Empire because you'll just win more.
I mean, I think there's something to be said for, in a shorter game where you have to take more risky maneuvers and get your guys out of cover, stormtroopers have a significant advantage.
Yeah, definitely. Like if you're forced out of cover to do something, those saves do make a difference.
And that's exactly why I take intercept out of my battle deck. Anyway.
Yep. And yeah, I think generally speaking, if you're we alluded to this earlier, if you're playing a rebel list and you have pathfinders, you should be cutting KP or intercept.
Probably KP,
But
right?
yeah, probably KP because of the potential bounty impact, and also because you probably don't have any vehicles in your list. Not that a lot of people play those anyway, but obviously vehicles count for KP. So anyway, I think personally, what you can do as rebels, for those first couple turns when you're not rushing the objective, is usually on most good maps there's at least some line of sight blocking terrain near the center. Use Luke as like a zone control piece and stick him behind that line of sight blocking terrain. And then if your opponent, starts pushing units into that center objective area, then you can use Luke reactively to start dicing them up. Luke is
that goes
great
for
that
Vader
purpose.
help as well. Really, I imagine Sabine is going to play somewhat similarly if she's got the Darksaber. I think that overall, if you've got a lightsaber-esque attack that is close melee oriented or force lightning, you can kind of zone people out with all four of those characters pretty easily in that fashion.
Yep. Yeah, so that's kind of how I play, and we can lump intercept into this because it's very similar. Especially, so one thing David and I were discussing about this earlier. I personally view intercept almost identical to KP key positions, just because so there is a round 2 scoring with intercept, and it definitely can matter, and you shouldn't just give that away for free, but also don't rush in there to try and get that
I
round
am
2
going
scoring,
to dissent
because it's only one. All right, well let me finish.
Objection.
Because there's essentially a double scoring at the end of the game for intercept, right? You have your turn 4 scoring, and then you have whenever the game ends scoring, which could be as early as turn 4. Hopefully not as early as turn 3, but that happened a couple times at LVO. So you can't if it means winning the attrition war to give up that first center scoring round on turn 2, I'm personally perfectly comfortable doing that. Now, as an Empire player, your calculus may be a little different, but at least for me running Wonder Twins, I won't give that middle point away for free, and I'll definitely make my opponent work to score it, but I'm not going to just rush Rebel Troopers in there to try and stack evenly.
So this is my problem with the timed games, in that sometimes you don't get to turn 4, and clearly that's something that should never happen. But if the game doesn't get to turn 4 and you didn't take that point on turn 2, you're going to feel real dumb about it.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, that's definitely a be mindful of the time kind of advice, right? I feel like if in a situation where you're not getting to turn 4, you're going to have a feeling just early on the early turns, either setup took forever, or your opponent was late, or you're just not making a lot of progress in those first couple turns. You're going to have a good sense of whether an intercept game is going to actually make it to turn 4 or not, usually by turn 2.
Yeah, it's just sometimes you haven't set yourself up to take the point on turn 2 because you didn't set yourself up to do it on turn 1,
yeah,
I don't know. I think that in these time tournament games, you need to be active. In my opinion, you need to be actively looking to push 2 points and intercept on turn 2. But
I view it the same way. I'm always fighting for turn 2 for the middle from the get go, and it just feels bad because I play lists like Wonder Twins, which don't like to bully the middle. They like to just lay back a little bit and just attrition for a couple rounds and then send Luke in to do the dirty work.
I will say, I feel your guys' pain nowadays playing Veers Boba. It's a lot harder to do it without Darth Vader, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, Darth Vader, you just walk into the center and you're like,
you're like,
this is mine. Bow down to me, please. I'm a Dark Lord of the Sith.
Oh, you wanted this point?
Yeah, I mean, but That's one advantage to him for sure.
Here, have 36 suppression tokens after I master evil your
Yeah.
ass on this point.
I missed that a little bit.
And just sort of briefly tangenting. I just made that a verb. Going on a brief tangent to talk about like these two objectives and which lists should be cutting or keeping them. I think we kind of already alluded to it, but if you're Veer's Boba or your Wonder Twins, that means you should be cutting one of these two objectives, intercept or key positions.
I personally ban intercept because bounty matters more on KP, and again, we already kind of discussed the fact that you cut KP because bounty matters more on KP, which makes sense,
Yep. Right.
And I cut intercept because I'm a scrub. that's probably the reason.
Like, so to be fair, I all bullcrap aside, when it comes down to banning objectives, if you are not comfortable playing a certain objective, even if it's not the best objective to cut, if you know you're really bad at it just because like you haven't figured it out or whatever, you should probably just cut it.
Yeah, or if it doesn't fit your play style or whatever, like nobody knows. If you've got the reps in, nobody knows which objectives you should be cutting.
Other than sabotage, you should never cut sabotage. But
well, yeah. So that's another thing. Maybe we can talk about sabotage next.
Yeah, we could also lump that into breakthrough because they kind of share a couple similarities here, just in terms of player color and how to do it.
I think.
Yeah.
I think breakthrough is a little bit easier to score, sort of at the last minute as red player. A
little bit.
But yeah, so sabotage often, each player places two objectives, which means that generally speaking, sabotage sort of results in a stalemate or a points tie, unless you've got a bounty situation going on. And blue player wins ties, including points ties and including ties of 0 points killed. So like, if you were to both throw your objectives down and blue player would just, sabotage or repair. I forget which one specifically blue does, but
blue
I can never remember that.
Okay, so I can't either. I was have to look at the super card.
Here's my mnemonic: red repair.
There you go.
All right, that's what I do.
Red repair. So if you as blue player just sabotage your two objectives down to 0 wounds and just chill, and if nothing else happened that game and you ended in a 0-0 points tie, you would win.
Sabotage up to 4 wounds.
Yeah, I mean,
whatever.
You
know what I mean.
I know what you meant.
Interact twice with each objective.
There you go.
This is kind of what I think the original KP was trying to be overall. In that it was like gives blue player a minor defensive advantage.
Yeah, it puts, so as blue player, you're putting pressure and sabotage on your opponent to do one of two things. They either have to be the first one to eliminate an activation, which in a competitive game is actually pretty difficult to do, especially if you're playing defensively, or they have to take a wound off one of your evaporators and keep it that way by the end of the game. So, the pressure's on red player and sabotage. And if you're playing with your deck, that means you're a blue player. So you should never be cutting sabotage, in my opinion.
Now blue also has a slight positional advantage on sabotage as well, because you get to put down the first evaporator.
That's true.
So you can actually put down your first evaporator and force your opponent into a suboptimal position for their first evaporator.
Can we talk about this a little bit? I don't want to go like haywire, but I know that there are multiple schools of thought on sabotage the moisture evaporators. I always put mine as far away from my opponent's deployment zone as physically possible, preferably on a board edge.
So, depending on deployments, certain deployments like zone more the map out than others. If you're on a deployment like battle lines or advanced positions where it's just essentially the edge of the map, don't try and use evaporator to zone out your opponent's evaporator choices.
Yeah.
But if you're on a deployment like major offensive, or Long March, depending on terrain, you might be able to do a like somewhat aggressive evaporator placement on your side of some kind of line of sight blocking terrain to essentially like push back the safe areas where your opponent can put their own evaporators. Now, this is highly terrain dependent and map dependent and deployment zone dependent, but it is possible as blue player to essentially like put your opponent in a position where one of their two evaporators is not in a safe
That's
position.
fair.
It
Yep.
definitely takes some practice to execute that without like screwing yourself with that first placement,
Yeah.
which I've done.
Yeah, you gotta be super careful when you do this sort of thing. So
Yep.
it's black magic.
Right, but it is possible, as blue
Yeah.
player.
I seem to
so
remember a game in Endless. I think you might have been the one playing in it, where you threw. It was. I think it was that Lothal map with the town. Do you remember that? Yeah,
Oh yeah, Tarkin Town. Yeah,
and you
Tarkin
like
Town.
tossed your evaporator like way up and to the right very aggressively because you like wanted the evaporator to be like close enough that your guys could like do stuff to it, but also like participate in the fight. And
Yeah.
he ended up like backcapping it on you.
Yeah, he backcapped it one time. That was pretty awful.
Anyway, that was
My
kind
own
of like
fault.
this is the danger of trying to get kind of sneaky greedy with.
That's why I said it was. That's why I said it was black
Yeah.
magic. You can play yourself. As our
you can
one is a
definitely
fan of saying.
Yeah, you can definitely outplay yourself by trying that. No question.
I think the biggest thing is blue player. As someone who actually doesn't mind being red player on Sabotage, is that like maximum firepower and Boba Rocket can blow an activation off the board if you're not careful. And specifically like a sniper team or like a 4-man unit of rebel troopers. Just make sure that you're like keeping your stuff where they can't get blown off the board by anything.
Yeah, that's the thing as red in the situation is that status quo you're losing from the start, and you're trying to destroy an activation quick to force blue out of their hole. Basically, because you're playing both breakthrough and sabotage in this kind of like blue is the defender mindset, and the incentives are all screwed up. And blue shouldn't be engaging until they take damage or lose a unit. They should just stand by.
Because as red player, often what I'll do is I'll like maximum firepower turn 1 a unit, and then on turn 2 I will Boba Rocket the same unit. In theoretically, it's generally dead by then, and then I just pull everybody back because I'm now blue player, essentially.
Yep.
So you gotta that is something you gotta watch and be careful of.
Yep, for sure.
You just gotta do the points calculations while your opponent's moving. You just gotta get that going.
Yeah, and I think Veer's Boba is uniquely positioned.
Oh, for sure.
To pull that off, just because of the double nuke.
Coordinated bombardment doesn't really even come close unless there's sniper teams in the open or something.
Right. Or unless you can get a cross angle.
That's also true. Pathfinder changes that equation a little bit.
So do we want to briefly hit breakthrough? It's kind of a similar concept with a little bit more possibility for like last minute scoring by red player. Well, by either player really, because all you need to do is get into that end zone.
Breakthrough is just the messiest objective, man.
It's very messy.
Like I always have a plan, and it never goes the way I want to.
Well, we could talk about like just to get the ball rolling on it. We could talk about disarray with breakthrough, which kind of presents a unique challenge in the game. So the way I view disarray is that you're kind of bidding for what side you're going to actually put the majority of your forces on. You're kind of playing chicken with your opponent. How many are you going to put in that other deployment zone? Really, how many? Which is like your opponent's sport edge deployment zone. And you're kind of playing chicken, and you're trying to figure out, who's going where for that first part of the game. And you'll get to a situation where, you just have you have a number of total unit leaders, and if you activate your opponent, you could actually just run to the weak deployment side, whatever side that is, as long as you've got intervening cover or some ability to keep yourself relatively safe, you can just pile into that one corner that they've deployed their weakest units at, and you can actually play a game of breakthrough with that's like relatively bloodless. In fact, I think I have an example of that game where I had a game against ATST snow troopers, but I had breakthrough disarray, and my army just ran away from my opponent's army because he couldn't catch me. And like the one turn his ATST was in a place to do damage, Han just reckless diversioned it, and he couldn't kill Han with the ATST. It just wasn't close enough to actually do damage to him. And Uncanny Luck bailed me out.
It's an interesting scenario just because rather than it being dictated by blue player, red player, it's strictly dictated by whoever has less activations has to be the aggressor, right? So whenever you're looking at objective cards and you look across the board and you have less activations than your opponent, generally speaking, you should try and avoid breakthrough, I think.
Right, because of the score, like if no units are killed, the score for breakthrough effectively is your activation count, right? So if you've got 10 and your opponent has 9, before any units are killed, the breakthrough score is 10 to 9. And that's kind of what David was talking about with like breakthrough disarray. This is especially applicable for Wonder Twins because you can sort of uniquely like place 2 reasonably strong forces in both of your deployment zones. And I think on breakthrough disarray, personally, I feel like that's a huge advantage for a Wonder Twins list because you just basically collapse on your opponent's weak deployment zone and eliminate the, whatever 1 to 3 activations they have over there. And then you've got 10 activations moving towards that far deployment zone, and your opponent essentially has to catch you. Because if they don't do anything, then you're going to win 10 to 9 or 10 to 8 or 10 to 7 or whatever. So personally, I think, that combination, that specific combination, disarray breakthrough, is very advantaged for dual commander lists for that reason. And disarray in general obviously is, but I think uniquely so for breakthrough just because you can collapse on that weak deployment zone.
Courage 2 assault units of any type are also heavily favored on breakthrough disarray just because of they have Courage 2, so they can operate pretty independently, and 2, because the zones are equidistant from each other. You've got range 4 between each zone, so your assault units are well poised to make contact by the second turn and just start blowing stuff up. Especially snow troopers with officers are in a pretty good position just to engage on the short edges. And it's always good to look at both directions and figure out which one's better for you. And honestly, like long edge deployment where you have the 2. I mean, if you look at it, it's like battle lines divided in half, and so the gap between the 2, that area is definitely worth looking at and considering almost more than the vertical direction. Which is going across, right? And our eyes deceive us because we perceive horizontal distances differently than we perceive vertical distances. So these vertical distances look longer than the horizontal distances.
Yeah, even though they're actually very close to each other.
Yeah, exactly. Good old geometry.
Yep. So do we want to talk recovers, the last one?
Oh, what to say about recover? Well, Boba Fett's really good at it.
Yeah.
As a jump.
I mean, if Jin's on the other side of the table, he's less good at it.
How to play it. It's not always about the center box. That's like the biggest piece of advice that I could give to someone is look at all the boxes and figure out what to do. Don't focus on the center if you can avoid it.
The other thing, the biggest thing that I would recommend to people is that if they've got like a unit leader carrying a box and you have snipers and they're not in a place to like line of sight block you, let them carry it until the last turn if you can't get to it. Like if you're not gonna be able to go pick that box up, don't let that one unit leader drop it until you know they can't pick it back up.
Yep. Yeah, because there's a possibility that you can, like I talked about my game earlier with Joe, like where you can snipe a rear box holding unit and force them to drop a box. There's also a couple other like ways to do that with things like force choke, where you can, obviously if you force choke a unit leader, that unit leader will replace another model, but if they're carrying a box, they still drop that box. So
Same goes with like terrain scoping. Anytime you can actually kill the unit leader model, the box gets dropped. So
yep.
Anytime a unit leader panics, a box gets dropped.
Also true.
So just like general recover advice, just going back to it's not always about the middle box. If you're facing against a list like Jin or Pathfinders or Boba Fett, where they're heavily advantaged, to potentially grab that middle box, and you want to make it about those secondary boxes, usually, like if your opponent's in a position where they can force recover, then you're going to be able to pick the deployment zone. So if you do like battle lines, blue places their boxes first. So if your opponent puts one of their safe boxes on, side A, then put your safe box on side A. And then, probably they're going to put their second quote unquote safe box on that same side, and then put your other safe box on that same side, and just make it like a scrum. Especially if you have a commander like Palpatine or Vader, where they excel in tight areas like that.
Yeah, just if running Wookiees, Snowtroopers, any of those assault type units.
Right. Essentially just make it about those 4 boxes and force your opponent to play in a 3x3 table, essentially.
Also, in the same vein, major offensive, avoid deploying your quote unquote safe boxes to the left of your panhandle. So if you look at the major offensive deployment zone, there's like a 3x3 square or a range band square, and then you have a little panhandle. Avoid putting boxes to the left of that panhandle, because that is a pretty vulnerable place unless you have a piece of line of sight blocking terrain.
That's danger zone. Don't do that.
Yeah, do not do that. And that's actually how I won recover, because there was a box in that exact location and it got crushed.
Close. Yeah.
Yep. It's you definitely want to put them on that right side, like near the fat edge of your deployment zone.
Yep.
In major offensive. A couple other things too with advanced positions, you can grab a box, or recon intel. You can grab a box on the first turn, your safe boxes. And don't just like forget about your safe boxes. The earlier you can secure those, the better, because it's possible that your opponent can suppress units or whatever and make it more difficult for you to grab those boxes. So
yeah, don't fight with a box unit, as obvious as that sounds, unless it's a dire emergency.
Unless you need to charge Luke.
Yeah, right.
Right.
As far as like ways to get the middle box, we talked about units like Boba and Luke being advantaged because they have jump. Usually that entails like hiding with that unit behind some piece of line of sight blocking terrain near the center, and then doing a last first activation with them. So last, jump in there, grab it, and then first jump out and run away with it. Pretty straightforward. But if you have a unit like that, you absolutely can put pressure on your opponent to try and flood the middle for that box to prevent that from happening. Just because, at some point in the game you can create a situation, especially if you're up on activations, where you can kind of do that at will. And then that, again, we talk a lot about, like, we've talked a lot so far about creating a defensive situation. That's how you create a defensive situation on recover, basically. All right, you guys got anything else on objectives?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. Gosh, we've spent quite a while.
Yeah,
and so I hope y'all were taking notes out there, because man, that was a whirlwind tour, and it was a lot of info. And if you have to, rewind, because there's a lot of good stuff in there.
A little bit of brain vomit going on there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So best kind of vomit.
We were going to talk about the live stream reveals of Bosk and Sabine's command cards, but
oh my goodness,
I guess we have something to talk about next time.
Slow news day.
Yeah, right. It's not like
I
mean, it's disappointing that we haven't got the Chronic Death Troopers article, but it's definitely not like we're hurting for spicy things to talk about.
I mean, I just I don't know. Have we even gotten the reveal article for them yet? We got the reveal article, but the actual the showcase article. If we get scrapped like Imperial, officers or whatever again, it's kind of feel bad.
Yeah, they owe us that specialist article.
You know? I mean, I don't know.
watch them push out the Imperial Specialist article like this Thursday.
Yeah.
And then
Oh boy. I would like to say, overall, now that we're touching sort of on the live stream, and I want to do this very briefly. Luke, Alex, if you guys are listening, that was fantastic. We would like to see more of it. That sort of thing is awesome community building. It gets everybody in the same Twitch chat. Everybody's excited. We're talking about the new stuff. Marketing department, please do more of it.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Even if, I mean, it was awesome to see Luke and Alex play. But just do more of that in general. Like show some random Legion games on your channel. Like that can't be. I mean, I don't know how hard that is.
Yeah. If you guys are too busy to do it, it could be two random dudes. Doesn't matter to me. Just like,
yeah, it was awesome.
Please do more of it.
All right, you guys got any other final thoughts?
No.
No.
All right. Hold on.
That was deep.
That was super deep.
Yeah, that was a profound silence.
Yeah. All right.
So next week we're gonna be like less than 2 weeks out.
Oh god.
Oh my gosh.
So much painting, so little time.
Oh man.
So much practicing.
Yeah.
I feel good
skill.
on the practice front of things. I'm okay there. But
I feel like I can never get enough reps in.
Yeah, I mean, like
likewise.
You can always get more, right? But I'm kind of, I think, at the diminishing returns point with this list.
Yeah, and at least me personally, I have literally tens of minutes every day to dedicate to this, blog writing, painting, and playing games. So, yeah, I think painting is gonna have to start edging some of that other stuff out at some point. All right, so we are the Notorious Scoundrels. I am Kyle.
I'm Mike.
I'm David.
And we will see you next week. Peace out.
Later.
Join us next time for another edition of the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. This has been a Fifth Trooper production.